Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Gary Reeves, who is a member of the Martin O'Neill Reading Celtic Supporters Club. Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind, Gary.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me along for the chat. Absolutely fantastic.
I've met you a couple of times over the last few months, or the few months prior to the lockdown, Gary, and we'll talk about a few plans that we've got in the coming months, hopefully. Before the end of the year, it would be nice to see them come to fruition. I remember the discussion we had down in Windsor where you spoke about your introduction to Celtic and, you know, you met Jock, Stein at Celtic Park, and it's just a remarkable story.
Yeah, it was, I was 15 years old and I've been a Celtic fan all my life, from a very early age of 5 or 6. I remember the European Cup final of '67 vividly, even though I was only 7. But the great influence on my life was my nan and granddad, who lived actually in the next street to us. So we were quite a close family. We had aunties, uncles, and my nan and granddad were all in virtually the same street. So I used to spend a lot of time around at my nan's, and that was the massive influence towards Scotland, Glasgow, and also obviously Celtic in the end. So my leanings went straight there, and it was a very passionate supporting Celtic. And my granddad had been promising me for a couple of years that he'd take me up to my first game. So I kept on it for years, for probably from age 10 upwards. And eventually he took me up when I was 15 years old. It was 1975, and we went up for the Celtic versus Motherwell game in January. It was a week after we got beaten by them 3-0 as well. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we went up on the Friday night. We stayed at my auntie's in Grangemouth near Falkirk, and we got the train to Glasgow obviously very early in the morning. I wanted to get there early because I wanted to go to the supporters shop where you could get programmes and badges. It's a little where the Celtic Development Pools was. There used to be a little, you may remember it, a little sort of like shed as such next door where you walk around, pick up programmes, and I used to sort of like add to my collection of programmes, which they used to send me down. Right. I used to write to them and they send me down badges and programmes. So I wanted to go and visit this to obviously introduce myself, because it's always been done by mail or phone, mainly mail. So went, had a look around, bought all my little souvenirs, and it was probably about 11 o'clock in the morning. And my granddad said, look, maybe we might be able to get in the ground and should we knock on the door? I said, well, it's a bit early. I said, what do you think? He said, no, come on. And my granddad was quite forceful. If he said, you don't ask, you don't get in life. So we did. We made our way to the entrance, the big main door at Celtic, the old Celtic mainstay and main entrance, and with the glass Celtic FC at the top. Just bought a pin badge, one of those actually. Fantastic.
Yeah, I see them. They're lovely actually, Gary. Yeah. Yeah,
I bought one anyway, so I've added that to my little collection. Anyway, getting back to we got to the door. My granddad knocked on the door, and guy opened it. It was Jock Stein. Oh, I couldn't believe it.
That's incredible.
So my granddad said, look, I brought my grandson up. He's 15 years old for his first game, and we thought we'd just knock on the door and see if we could have a quick look around. He goes, well, of course. He goes, I was like gobsmacked. I didn't know what to say at first. I was starstruck, you name it. I was just open-mouthed, Jock Stein. Anyway, he brought us in, shook his hand, and he gives us a tour. He gives us a tour of the trophy room. And this is on the 11 o'clock in the morning before a match against Motherwell. And he took time out, dressing rooms, you name it. Went down the tunnel. He let me kick a ball on the park. I had my picture taken in the tunnel, which I've still got. I was 15 years old. We must have spent a good hour. It may be longer. I don't know, because you lose track of time. And then we sat in the stand and we talked. My granddad, Jock Stein, and myself. And he said, he goes, whereabouts you going to the ground today? I said, I've always wanted to go in there. And I pointed across at the jungle. He goes, oh no. He goes, I tell you what, I'm going to give you 2 tickets for the stand. All right. I think you'll be safer in here. Don't get me wrong, I love the place. He goes, but your first game, enjoy the game, sit in the stand here behind the dugouts. So, and that's where I sat. And obviously he had to move on, but he must have spent an hour, maybe could be 2. I didn't really look at the time, but it was fantastic. And it was my first trip was truly momentous, and I just can't. I couldn't describe the words at the time, and probably still can't now, probably. Anyway, and that was it really, and that was my. I was then on my journey to becoming a Celtic fanatic, even though I thought I was already. But once I left school and started my first job at 16. I then started to go up with the London number 1 Celtic Supporters Club, and I used to go up every 2 weeks to home games. Very rarely went to away games, just mainly home games, and I did that for a number of years, going up as much as I could. All my money went on following and coming up and following Celtic. And those early years were with the London number 1, and it progressed from as you get older and older and older. And that's how my journey started.
That is a remarkable introduction, Gary, to Celtic.
Incredible. I mean, you could probably, if you dreamt it, you think you were, well, it wasn't true, but it was absolutely incredible. Yeah, the only footnote to that was that we got beat that day 3-2. And unfortunately, Harry Hood scored twice that day. And I believe Willie Pettigrew, who was a bit of a thorn in our side at those times, I think he scored twice from Motherwell.
Willie Pettigrew is the player, when I asked Andy Lynch when we were working on Andy's book, he was a player that he said was vastly underrated, always caused him problems when he played against Willie Pettigrew.
Yeah. Got a lot of goals against us.
A very, very good player. We've had a fantastic introduction to your Celtic supporting life, Gary, and then you said that obviously once you've started getting a bit of money in your pocket, you're dedicating that to coming up to Celtic. What are some of the memories of travelling up here as a teenager?
I went up to every other home game for long periods. I mean, I used to travel up on the 7:45 train from Euston. It used to get in about 1 o'clock or whatever, and then it would get the 64 bus out to Parkhead, those green and white buses and green, white and gold buses in those days. Sometimes we'd walk it, but it depends if the train was on time or late. And then if we were okay, we'd try and get a quick pint somewhere, or we'd have a can on us from the train. And I would come up every couple of weeks, and sometimes I would stay over, and sometimes I would get the late train back. And there used to be a late train back. We used to come down from Inverness, and sometimes I would get it either from Coat Bridge. I used to go out to Coat Bridge as well, or we just get the overnight train back from Central Station. But it depends how much money I had. If I could stay over, I would stay over. I remember I come up for the 77 Cup final when Kenny's last game, when he lost his medal with the guy in the wheelchair or something, and he lost it down. But I was up there I stayed in Mary Hill that night at a friend's place who I met at a previous game, and that 77 Cup final always sticks in my mind because it was not a very nice day. We beat them 1-0, and obviously we won the cup as well. But those early years were mainly coming by train, and also we used to get the bus up, the coach up as well. It was £2.50 to get a return on the. We used to go from the Archway in London, the number 1, and we used to get the bus, and it was £2.50 for the return journey. And that was in the late 70s, and then obviously the train became more and more. Not so much cheaper, but it was reasonable. So the club ditched the coach and went more to train. And then on the old firm games, what we used to do was we used to go up on a Friday night. So we go up on the overnight train on the Friday, so we'd have longer period there. And also it's a bit safer as well, because we didn't know when the London Rangers sports clubs were going up, so we just did our booking. And to be fair to the Transport Police and that, they managed it very well, so we never really appeared on the same train. We did on a few occasions, but very, very few, you know. If there was an occasion, they'd have half the train would be, top end would be Celtic and the bottom end would be Rangers, whatever. But those early days were fantastic by train and by coach. Some of the games were I said the Cup final, 77, Cup final in 80 as well, when all that madness happened. Again, I was up there for the weekend for that one. Went up with the London number 1. And I actually took a couple of mates up for the 1980 Cup final, who one was a Chelsea fan, one was a Spurs fan. And we've been up for the semi-final. I've been up for the semi-final against the Hibs. We beat them 5-0. I think Georgie Best played in the semi. It's a bit of a walkover in the semi, but we beat them 5-0. And then the final against Rangers, and we beat them 1-0. And I had 2 friends come up, and they were gobsmacked by the whole weekend. They'd never seen anything like it in terms of the atmosphere. I know there was things that happened that day, but generally the the atmosphere, the celebration was fantastic, you know.
And it's great to introduce fans of other clubs, Gary, to Celtic. We keep discussing how special we feel the atmosphere is, but people come into Celtic Park and they agree with that. You know, fans, pundits, players, they all say there's something a bit special. Now, that game you mentioned there, the 1980 Cup final, obviously after the riot, the legislation was introduced to ban alcohol from sports stadiums. Now, you've seen the before and the after, and that was now, 40 years ago. So do you think it's time that we revisited that, Gary, when obviously football was back to normal? Do you think it's something, when you look at the English grounds, for example, where you can go for a pint at half time, will Scotland ever get back to that situation where we think the people in the stadium are responsible enough to have a drink?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a great idea, because at the moment, all you can have a drink before and afterwards, either at the Kerrydale bar and obviously number 7, but you can't drink. Obviously, as we were doing before the 1980s. I remember you mentioned the 80 where the alcohol was banned. I remember one of the first games after that, big games, was Celtic versus Real Madrid. Do you remember? And obviously we beat them 2-0. And I remember, because I used to also come up and meet up with the Phil Cole Celtic Supporters Club. I was a member of that up in Scotland, in Coe Bridge. I went to many away games in Europe with them, and I used to come up on the train, go out to Coe Bridge, then come back in with them, then go back to Coe Bridge and stay at my friend's house. And I remember that game against Real Madrid was a midweek, beat them 2-0, fantastic headed goal by Johnny Dahl. I can see it now. And I remember heading up to, and they were searching every other person. And I had a couple of cans of Tennent's down my sleeves and my jacket. And I actually managed to get in the ground with them. I know it sounds bad, but at that time it was so used to going to Celtic Park with the lads from Phil Coles and with the lads from London. And you'd have your carry out in there, and everyone would be passing down a vodka or a whiskey, and it was great. But all of a sudden it stopped because of what happened. Yes, and I agree, something had to happen. But that Real Madrid game, there must have been 70,000 there. Probably half those people got in a drink that day in terms of hiding it, because they're only doing every third person. So I was sweating because obviously I had a couple of cans, but I was 20 years old. But that was. But getting back to your question, Paul, yes, I hope that will be revisited, because I think things like the cans in the ground, that's never going to happen again, and rightly so. But yes, I think the modern day football fan, whether it's in Scotland, England, Wales or Ireland, I think it can be revisited, and I hope that somewhere it could be talked about up there, that it could be reintroduced, because you can, as you say, go to any ground in England and have a drink. And even my club that I'm attached to in non-league, we serve pints of beer through the little hatch in plastic glasses, and people sit in the stand and have a drink. That's at non-league level, but who knows? I hope so.
The thing is, well, Gary, it will change the culture of people who do want to have a drink, feeling the necessity to cram it into a short space of time before the game, and they could just enjoy it, really, for a couple of hours in the stadium. Now, you started going to the games in 75, and your first introduction, obviously, you've explained that Jock Stein gave you the stand tickets and you wanted to go to the Jungle. From the way you're speaking there and being at the games with your pals, I'm guessing that you were a Jungle regular. Yeah,
I was a Jungle regular. And also, I used to go in the Jungle, but I used to switch to the Rangers end, because a lot of the lads from Coe Bridge, because they used to come in there on their coach at that end, they traditionally used to go into the Rangers end, and there was halfway up, halfway behind the goal, and that was where the Phil Coles lads used to go, whether it could be 50, 60 or 100 of them. And so I used to alternate, sometimes Jungle or go to the Rangers end. I knew if I went to the Rangers end at those times, there'd be plenty of drink there as well. But obviously, I introduced with the Jock Stein thing. I just want to go back to when that great feeling I had. Also, is that what it also stamps on my head was that, especially later in life, when you talk about the Celtic family, and what Jock Stein done that day was an introduction to the Celtic family, and that was that word Celtic family makes us different from every other club. This is my feeling. We are a club like no other because of the passion, the camaraderie. We speak to it. The Celtic family is huge. And you can be in Tenerife, Lanzarote, Brazil, and you bump into someone or see someone in the hoops light, and immediately you'll talk and you've got an immediate connection. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. It's the Celtic family.
Oh, absolutely, Gary. And again, we've seen some of that ourselves just a few months ago, where a friend and I came down to visit yourself and basically spent, the night in your local area with Celtic fans. And that middle ground, that rapport is all you need. And then obviously you can take it from there. And And we are still chatting now, obviously, just about that. If we think about your first game being in 75, now that was just after the last 9 in a row. Obviously, the last league title was won in 1974. We've just been announced as 9 in a row champions again, Gary. So your Celtic supporting life almost has been sandwiched in between these two momentous occasions. And we've had, obviously, massive ups and downs in between. So let's run through some of those ups and downs. I mean, the centenary season, for example, Gary, what was your memories of that? Because that was actually my introduction to Celtic as a 7 or 8 year old, was a centenary season.
That was absolutely momentous season because personally for me, I wanted it so bad. You know, to do the things in the centenary season, Billy McNeil, it just was there and it was written. And as the season progressed, and I just thought, we are going to do this, you know. And I went up to many games that season, and it was probably that was one of the finest. Really, I know we've done the treble, but that was for me to do that in the centenary year was fantastic.
It was dreamlike. Billy McNeil described it as a fairy tale, you know. We had our name written on that because there were so many things happened that season with last minute goals. You're 3 minutes away and you think, are we going to get, you know, it's looking, all of a sudden we go bang, bang, bang. And there were so many times where, especially with Roy Aitken and stuff, spurring things on, it was like, this is meant to be. It was, and we had a core. I always go back to that team, Gary. That was like probably the last homegrown team. And what I mean by that, I know that all the players didn't come through the Celtic ranks, but it was made up mainly of Scottish players, and there was a few Irish caps, some of whom were Englishmen. But, you know, that was the last era, if you like, of that kind of makeup of a team. Just after it, I mean, that was my introduction. I'm thinking, oh, this is great. We're going to win doubles every other year. We went into a period of decline, which took us into the early 90s. What was it like as a travelling fan, Gary, coming up in the early 90s and then during the takeover?
It was hard, but then, you know, everyone always said keep the faith, and that's another thing that's always synonymous with the Celtic families. KTF, keep the faith, and you kept going because you're Celtic through and through. And as the song goes, win, lose or draw. So you're there week in, week out. So, you know, it was hard. It was hard the fact that some of those barren years where we got close, and then all of a sudden we would look like. We were finishing second and third in the league for a couple of times as well. I think one season we finished fourth, or fifth.
Fifth under Big Billy, actually, yeah.
Yeah, then we did get to a final, and we had a barren run. Then when we won it, what a feeling that was, you know. But yes, you stuck with it, and because we knew, I think everyone, myself knew, any Celtic fan, we would be back. We're a massive club. The passion of the terracing would eventually get onto the pitch, and it was just getting the right moment. But it was barren years. Yeah, it was hard.
It must have been really tough coming up, you know, with your journey coming up to the games. During that period after the takeover, I watched a team that I always look back fondly on, Gary, that were playing under Tommy Burns. It took him a season or so to get going, but once we did, and once he started bringing in and putting his stamp on a team, bringing in his players, we watched a very entertaining side. What's your memories of the Tommy Burns era?
Tommy Burns was one of my idols. I met the guy a few times because he also had the Phil Cole pub for a little while in Coatbridge, and I met him there a few times. It was I so wanted Tommy to be there for many years and win many trophies. And that season in particular that I think you're talking about is when I think we only lost once, didn't we? Yeah. And we played some fantastic football. We had a few draws, but the football we played, and Rangers had a really good side as well because obviously they spent a lot of money they didn't have, etc., etc. We all know the story there, but they had assembled a really good side. But we went toe to toe, and to lose the league that season, I so badly wanted it for Tommy because we played some excellent football, didn't we? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think we had an affinity with that team. You know, there had been many, many years where we were watching teams and managers even where we just didn't have that same connection. But Tommy brought that back in many ways. You know, even the players from overseas, we did have an affinity with those players. I know some of them ended sourly. But, you know, without getting rid of Di Canio, Van Hooydonk, Cadet, we may not obviously have required to bring in a certain number 7 from Feyenoord, the Swede, the great Swede. Do you think in all the years of you supporting Celtic, and I know you've seen the great Kenny Dalglish, Larsson's one of the finest, if not the finest, you've seen?
Yes, I mean, I saw Jinky play twice. I think I saw him play. He played in the 75 side that I went up for my first game. But the memories of Larsson, for me, I've never seen in modern day football anyone of that ilk at Celtic Park. I mean, I know we had some great goal scorers in the 60s and 70s, but in terms of as you're growing up in the modern era, for me, Larsson was. I remember his first game as well when the pass to the Hibs guy,
Chick Charnley.
Yeah, Chick Charnley, wasn't it?
Yes, aye.
And but who'd have thought then when he played that pass? And I'm sure there was many thousands of Celtic fans in the ground that day saying, "Who's this guy?" But what a find! I mean, he gelled into the Celtic way of life, the Celtic way that we play, and I think we improved him because he became a player. He became a confident goal-scoring player who just loved playing and putting that shirt on. And it was fantastic to watch him, wasn't it?
He definitely did grow and develop, Gary. I mean, one of the interesting comparisons that I've spoken about before is Andy Lynch, whose autobiography I worked on, and Simon, his son, both played with fantastic number 7s in Kenny Dalglish and Larsson. And the way that Andy Lynch and Simon Lynch explain the way that Dalglish and Larsson went about their day-to-day business on a training pitch, the way that they prepared for games was almost exact. You know, it's really interesting to hear Andy talking about Dalglish, Simon talking about Larsson, because they're talking about, you know, two players with the same makeup. You know, two guys who, the consistency levels, you know, when you look at Larsson, the consistency of that player was over a period of 7 years was quite frightening. Obviously, every player has bad games, and Chris Sutton tells the story of Larsson having an absolute nightmare at Almonvale. And Celtic have had a few themselves over the last couple of seasons at Livingston, but you know, Larsson, the level that he consistently met for Celtic was quite astonishing. And I think he hit his peak at Celtic. I mean, people might disagree with that because he went on to win a European Cup, but it was at Celtic that he developed.
100%.
Now, you've already mentioned Jimmy Johnstone, so let's have a wee chat about Jinky, Gary, whilst we're on the subject of number 7s. How fond of the legendary Jimmy Johnstone are you? And please tell us about what you've been doing as a supporters club and as a group of supporters clubs to continue his legacy.
Yeah, I mean, Jinky's he's my legend. He was, for me, the greatest ever player that's pulled on the shirt. And another one of those 7s like your Larsson, Dalglish. But for me, Jinky was out there, like one of us, just came up through the ranks and became a legend. And what a player. I mean, you know, you just don't see people like that anymore. I love to see him in modern football, twisting, turning, jinking. I don't think anyone could actually mark him unless you actually fouled him. But what a player. For me, I grew up a Jimmy Johnstone fan. And what happened was he's always been my idol. And I got together, I had this thing about, because I was involved with a non-league club and I was chairman there for 5 years and at Burnham, which was a step 3 and step 4 in the National League system in England. And I had this dream of doing something. I knew that I didn't have any connections to get Celtic down for a friendly, or I did try actually. And I even wrote to Neil Lennon at the time and Martin O'Neill, but I knew that I couldn't get them down for a friendly. But I had this thing about maybe I could do something for the supporters. Now, as you know, in London, there's a lot, thousands and thousands of Celtic fans. Then there are a number of clubs, supporters clubs that are based in a 50-mile radius. So what I did was I got my thinking head on, and I went out to Mönchengladbach a few years ago for the Champions League, and I went out with the Ramsgate Celtic Supporters Club because they ran a bus from Ramsgate over. What I did was I got chatting to a few of them who were over in we actually stopped in Cologne, stayed in Cologne, and I said, look, I've got an idea. Do you think, because one of the guys was quite well connected with other supporters clubs around, I said, do you think if I did a 6-a-side tournament, it's going to be the Jimmy Johnstone tournament, do you reckon I'll get much feedback from any supporters clubs? He said, yeah, I think you would do. So what I did was, that's when I first come up with the idea of bringing this tournament to my club, to the club that I was at, and to bring 8, 9, 10 supporters clubs, play for the name of Jimmy Johnstone and play for charity, which would be Motor Neurone, and also for breast and prostate cancer. Because myself, I'm in remission from prostate cancer 4 years in. So it was a big part of for me to obviously have that charity involved, to give something back to the charity, to prostate cancer. Yeah. So it was Motor Neurone and prostate cancer, and also I got Celtic Foundation involved because I had no connections up there. So I thought I'd write a letter to them, and they answered, and they also got involved at that time. But that's where I sort of first laid the seed of this tournament, and from there I came back, spoke to my Reading Celtic Supporters Club at a meeting, an AGM of the Southwest supporters clubs that included some clubs from Birmingham, Oxford, Swindon, and I think a few people thought, not so much mad, but could I pull it off? And because I'd done this all by myself. So I sent out emails, went on to Facebook sites and I just sent out to everything I could, every support club I could think of. I did know some people in those clubs because obviously I've been around a long time. I was a member of Hayes, London number 1. So I knew people at Wimbledon. And I sent this first email out and got a reasonably good response. Mm-hmm. I then went a step further and started putting out a poster. And then it looked like it was going on. So I then put it together, went to see the club I was at and said, I'm going to stage this in May in 2018. And I got 10 teams there for 2018 and 10 teams there for 2019. And we roughly raised £2,000 on each one to go to those charities, which was split to the charities. But I did this all on my own. And I got volunteers in, marshalled it. I know a lot of referees, the grades 2, 3 and 4 referees, which I do for my football here. I'm involved quite heavily in football. I got referees in, I got photographers in. Celtic Foundation came down, Megan Fallon came down and presented the trophy, the 2018 one. Fantastic. Got signed shirts sent down as well from Celtic FC. We had raffles and the whole thing went like clockwork. But I think that 2018 one, I thought, well, I'll go again in 19. Can I match that? And I did. And that's the first 2 years were an incredible. It filled me full of pride to that I'd actually got 100, 200 Celtic fans from probably a 50-mile radius to come to this club in sleepy outskirts of Slough called Burnham Village, and to come and play a day of football and have a celebration of what is, again, I call it the Celtic family. It was so important to me to see all those green and white people there with their flags and their supporters clubs and all around the ground in the stand. It was just very emotional.
Great achievement. Absolutely brilliant, Gary. And you and I came together as a result of your efforts to put the Jimmy Johnstone tournament together. And so had we not been locked down over the last 10 weeks or so, there would have been a third instalment. So if you let our listeners know what the plans are, because obviously this at some point will be revisited. We don't know, Gary, until we're advised by those that are governing this situation. But if you could tell us what the plans are.
It was due to take place on June the 6th. But as we know what's going on at the moment, and I sit on a lot of Zooms and stuff because I do a bit of work for the County FA, as well as it's another football job that I do. And I get invited on to WebExes and etc. And it's talking about how we restart grassroots football, which involves things like tournaments. It's going to be very hard because no one really knows. The government, pro football will come back, as we've seen in Germany, and obviously with the EPL, the English League as well, back in training now. But grassroots football is a different ballgame because there isn't any funding there for testing players. You've got parks, small stadiums that are going to have no way of actually trying to put any kind of social distancing in place at this moment in time. So it's a little bit harder, and we don't know. I mean, I sat on a WebEx the other day, last Tuesday, and they were talking about grassroots. It could be September, it could be October, it could be January the 1st even. We don't know because once the English FA and all the other organisations can find a way that we can come back in grassroots, then it's a question that's not going to be answered for a little while longer just yet. But once it is, and I'll probably be hopefully one of the first to find out, then I can start putting my wheels in motion to when I can stage this. Now, I suppose in reality, we're looking with all what's going on this year and we just don't know where it's going. It's going to be definitely for next year, which will be June 21 or May 21, whatever it may be. But if I could squeeze it in before then, who knows? But being a realist, and I can't see it being this year. So do I then hang fire and then just concentrate on June next year because it's quite a way away? Because that would probably be the most practical thing to do. But as and when we find out, who knows? We just don't know at the moment. It's hard, isn't it?
It's difficult. It is difficult. And of course, if and when that does happen, and you know, it probably will be May, June 2021 for this particular tournament, the Jimmy Johnstone Charitable Trust will also be involved, Gary, and we'll be coming down to support that in every way we possibly can.
I mean, that was a weekend, and the weekend I came up from when we actually got everything sorted, and I took a trip out, to Cafkin Park, and on the Friday, that was absolutely fantastic. Jim and Kenny, and having a walk around it. For me, to get out into the centre of Cafkin Park and look around, you could just sense the whole passion. And I was just looking around, and you could see the terraces in between the trees and that. And that was also very emotional to actually stand there where the Celtic greats have actually been on there as well, and Jinky as well. And to look around, and I was just to take it in was one of the highlights of my life, to actually sense that, the Celtic thing, and then to be shown around the actual the dressing rooms and what was like a TARDIS. That's the only way I can describe it. It's a TARDIS.
It is.
It was very emotional. It was very incredible. And Finbar, who came out with me as well. We were just gobsmacked. And for Jim and Kenny to take the time to we sat there and talked and had a cup of tea and we talked football, and that's what the Celtic family do. As I keep going back to, and then to meet obviously everyone on the Saturday, which was the 7th in number 7, yourself, Agnes, Danny McGrain, and it's dreams come true again. From when I was 15, I feel like 15 years old again, because I was sitting there thinking, Jockstone, I was 15 at 75, and now I'm here, sitting here, talking Celtic at, what was it, a modern Celtic park.
Yeah.
And to have that connection now with the JJ Charitable Trust and the Academy is a dream come true. Fantastic. And it's like, it's hard because it's so, you probably see the passion in my face. It's like,
exactly.
I'm just overwhelmed,
No, it'll be good to link up again, Gary, when it's safe to do so and we can get the wheels in motion. A couple of times you've mentioned your involvement or your previous involvement with Burnham FC in the non-leagues in England. Tell us a wee bit about that. How did you get involved there and how was that experience for you, Gary?
Yeah, it was a very great experience, up and down experience as chairman. But what it was, I run a football league down here with 3 divisions, adult football. I've been the general secretary for 12 years. And I'm also a council member at the county FA as well, so I sit on discipline hearings and stuff, and so I'm a wingman on those hearings, so I do a lot. So anyway, because of these involvement and things, I got approached by the club, Burnham, saying, look, why don't you come and help us out on match days and come down and give us some of your advice and get involved at a non-league club, which was at that time was a step 4. In the Southern Central Division. So I went down there. I was only there a year, and I got asked to become chairman. So I thought about it, come home, talked to my wife, talked to the chairman that was stepping down, because he was the one that recommended me, a guy called Bob Breen, and I took it on. And it opened my eyes to running a club at non-league level. We went up to step 3. We found it very hard at step 3, which was you're only 2 steps away then from the National League, and you're only 4 steps away from pro football in League 2. It's a massive difference between playing at steps 4 and 5, then going to step 3, because then you're up against teams like Corby Town, Weymouth, St Albans, Hemel Hempstead. All these teams have got huge budgets, and we're just a sleepy village club that's got lucky, or we deserve to be there. We got there we won the league. So, but it's also opens your eyes as the higher you go up, the more harder it gets. And it was a bit of a shock to us. We lasted 2 seasons and got relegated, but you live and learn. And we try to try and bounce back. But it was a harsh lesson, and certainly I gained experience from that. But I only stayed for 5 years as chairman, because I got prostate cancer and I stepped down. But I still retained the links for the club and came back as I was offered the chairmanship back, and I turned it down. I was then offered the role of club and company secretary. So it's something which I like doing, because I was doing chairman and secretary as a dual role, and I did that, and that's where I am at the moment. But non-league football is also a very, very fantastic arena to be in, because you meet some lovely people. You go out to many, many grounds, and we travel to places out southwest, all over the places. In great journeys in the FA Cup. We got through 3 rounds of the FA Cup, only a round away from the round 1. That's where the big money is. So it's great experiences, and as I said, you're meeting football people. But while I was there, obviously meeting football people, I always made sure that I was aware that I was a Celtic fan as well. And I'll tell you a small little story. We played Corby Town, and Corby Town has got quite a big Scottish contingent in Corby. Yeah. And we went up there for our first game in the step 3, first game of the season. And they used to get big crowds, Corby. It was 700, 800, 900. And I walked into the boardroom and I saw a Rangers crest. But I always wear a Celtic t-shirt underneath I used to wear shirt and tie, obviously chairman. I always have a Celtic t-shirt on underneath. So I met the chairman. He was a Rangers supporter, and I said, I put it up at the crest. So, and as I put it up, I just put my tie away, opened up a few of my buttons on me. I went, there you go, big Celtic t-shirt. And he was sort of like a bit gobsmacked as well. He's a bit shocked and stuff and obviously my accent being English, he was asking me questions and stuff as to why, and I told him Started fan of my life. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we gubbed them 3-0.
Good on you. Good on you, Gary.
So we were 2 up at half time, went in for a cup of tea in the boardroom, and then I had a pint of Guinness at full time before went back on the coach, and we beat them 3-0 first game.
Oh, brilliant. I thought you were going to tell me he was a Celtic man, because as you say, there's a big Celtic contingent in there as well. There's a big supporters club. Great, and you're now with the Martin O'Neill Celtic Supporters Club. Martin O'Neill was another great name, another great manager that we saw, and someone, only the second Celtic manager to lead us into a European final in 2003. At that time, did you feel that O'Neill was going to be the man that brought European glory back to Celtic? And do you still think that that is possible?
Yeah, I actually thought when we brought him on board, I thought, here we go, because I thought the man has got a fantastic track record, his motivational skills, and also the way that he set his teams out. And I was so excited when he became Celtic manager, and I really was confident that we could do something. In that first season as well, when we and the second season, when we started to get results in Europe, which we hadn't done so much in the previous years, had we? And obviously it then rolled into the Seville time. But yes, straight from the first moment he was brought on board, I had the feeling that this is going to be a very, very good era for us, you know, especially when he started bringing in the players that he did. It all seemed to gel. And what a man. I mean, I met him a couple of times because Martin used to bring Celtic down to London quite a lot in those earlier years, QPR, Fulham, all those sort of games that I went to. And he also trained at a place called Bisham Abbey. Bisham Abbey is probably not very far from Marlow and from Slough. So when they used to come down, I used to jump in my car with my mate and we used to go up and watch them train. So I used to know a sneaky way into Bisham Abbey because I played football there many times. So I used to get in easy. And I used to go in, I talked to Chris Sutton and I spoke to Martin O'Neill and John Robertson. And yeah, I'd take a couple of days off work and pop down to Bisham when they were there. You know, because they used to they stayed at the same hotel in Burnham Beaches, which the England team did. They used the same hotel as the England team. And I remember once we jumped in the car, we went to the hotel thinking we could get some autographs, and they were all getting on their coach, so we followed the coach to Bisham Abbey. And I remember there was I think was it Jonathan Gould, the goalkeeper, waving out the back window. Because he could see the scarf in the window and stuff like that. And they're all putting their thumbs up and stuff out the windows at us, you know.
Good stuff, Gary. I mean, there were great days under Martin O'Neill, and I speak a lot to Celtic fans who regard him as the greatest manager of their lifetime. Obviously, you've seen Jock Stein, you saw Jock Stein yourself, but O'Neill broke the domination of Rangers. And if you look at obviously what's happened to them since the O'Neill years, you know, the impact that Martin O'Neill made was quite incredible. When you look at the 9 in a row era with the charismatic Brendan Rodgers, with the much maligned Ronnie Dyler, and with the Neil Lennon version 1 and 2, do you feel that Lennon might have it in him to put something together, put a run together that might see us progress? I'm not going to throw it out there and say we're going to get to a final, Gary, but there was some positive signs this season, wasn't there?
That's probably the most positive things I've seen this season for a long time. I felt that obviously we have seen obviously Lennon Mark 1 and Mark 2. I think he's a better manager now than he was. I think he's a good manager then, but I think he's a better, more mature. He's more accomplished now. And I think this season has been fantastic for Europe, and I can only see us progressing onto a better stage because we seem to have turn the corner and getting results. We had a hiccup against Copenhagen, but what we did, we won a group. I mean, when was the last time we won a group? Anything like in Europe, you know? But if you look back, obviously Lennon Mark 1 and then Ronnie Dyler, I think they're all parts of a jigsaw. The way I look at it as a Celtic fan, it's all meant to be. The 9 in a row where we had the Lennon and then the Dyler, it all seemed to, it's like a jigsaw, isn't it? That's the way I feel, is that, and it all these things meant to be to get to 9 in a row. But as going back to your question about Europe, this season's been good and fantastic, and we've had some really, really good times. And I think that can get better because I think Lennon's got it right. I do. And I think it's very similar to, and also when you think he's come out of the Martin O'Neill school of, if you want to put it in those words, and I can see that. And he must have learned a lot from Martin O'Neill in terms of setting up. Because remember, Martin got us to that Seville final, which I thought we'd, to get into a European final in my modern lifetime, because I was very young, 6, 7 and 10 for the two before that, I never thought I'd see it again, to get to Seville. And I think I've got that same feeling about Lenny, that we could get, maybe I'm being over about getting to a final, but maybe a Europa final. The Champions League is a little bit way off, but certainly to get to a last 16 or last 32 of Champions League, I think is possible, achievable. Some people probably think we're mad thinking that, but no, we're Celtic fans. We're not mad. We're positive.
Yeah, we do believe the impossible at times, Gary. And it's based on a true and rich European heritage. It's not as though it's a pie-in-the-sky dream. I do look at Lenny, and you're right, he comes from the O'Neill stable, who comes from the Brian Clough stable, so there is a passing down, if you like, of the baton. And if Celtic were able to retain some of these phenomenal talents that come around every now and again, Gary, your Van Dijk, Wanyama, Dembele, Eduard, and Celtic fans have come to almost... They're resigned to the fact that they'll stay for 2 or 3 seasons and move on. And you just kind of think, well, if we could maybe just keep a hold of them for that wee while longer, we might assemble a team that could make the difference.
I mean, when you think, you talked about Dembele there, just like Paul was going to have a think about what would have happened if we'd have kept Dembele and him and Eddie would have formed some kind of partnership. I mean, that's breathtaking.
That's scary, absolutely scary. It's actually, it's quite depressing to think about that, because they could have tore it up, the two of them together, and Eduard, who's maturing, it's going to get to a point, and you fear that the vultures are starting to circle Celtic Park. And again, I mean, I was brought up in an era where we weren't progressing in Europe, Gary. You mentioned the Real Madrid game, you've then mentioned O'Neill. We did nothing largely between those 2 points in our history. But I do still believe in the rich history that we have in Europe. But I also think that the Scottish game now, and I've been a massive defender of the Scottish game, looking over the last few months, I think the Scottish game now has kind of shown itself up, and I think there may well be a time in my lifetime where Celtic are no longer playing in Scotland, and it might actually be that process may be sped up by the current situation. Gary, what do you think Scottish football is going to look like once we get back to playing games and starting up a new season, whenever that may be?
In terms of Scotland, I mean, obviously we've made the decision, which is the correct one, to do what we did, and we're champions of 9 in a row now. It was the correct thing to do. I think that was probably the best thing in terms of the SPFL. Now I've got a couple of months to look at how they start the season in August. Also, we've got 2 leagues out there, well, 1 league, German league, and also got the EPL, the English Premier League, which will obviously be starting very shortly. And Scotland will look at that as to how they're sort of progressing and how they're managing it. So that's great, because it will give some really good markers for the SPFL to get their season kicked off in August. And I hope it does. And I hope we can see football again. Now, the question is that will it be behind closed doors? Quite possibly. And when will fans be allowed back? Probably capacities may be reduced. That's a likelihood as well. But I think the main thing is for Scotland to look at the other models and get ours right. And I think they will. And that's, getting it prepared right. And I think we've got a great chance of doing that by looking at what other countries are doing, and by calling the end to our season and working towards getting the season kicked off in August. Hopefully we're right, and it does kick off in August. But it's going to be a completely different ballgame now in terms of the grounds and stuff and the social distancing. Who knows what we can expect already. I mean, I'm sure we get it right.
For someone like yourself, for Celtic fans around the world, we know that there's far more serious things to consider during these times, but obviously it will be great when we're able to get back to the games, Gary, and it'll be brilliant to see you back up at Celtic Park and Cathkin Park, so that we can plan, the 3rd instalment of the Jimmy Johnstone tournament that you've set up. It
will happen and it will come back, and but obviously it has to be safe, and I'm pretty sure it will be. Will be safe when the SPFL decide to restart, and we can crack on and get 10 in a row.
Oh, brilliant! Of course. Now, Gary, it's been an absolute pleasure once again catching up with you about your Celtic memories. It's been a pleasure to hear about your introduction to Celtic and how you're still involved with the club. And all that's left for me to say is thank you very much for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Yeah, and thank you very much for inviting me. And obviously, thank you very much for the hospitality when I was up in March, for yourself and Jim and Kenny and JJA. But it's been a pleasure.